Hello, this is the Coach and Benway podcast. I'm Coach Redpill. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Benway, and this is actually the second time we're doing today's episode because we fucked it up on the first try. We sounded like Benway. You tell me, didn't we sound like a couple of idiots who didn't know what the hell we were talking about?
I still think you're attracted to the Ukrainian cashier.
I'm not.
You tried to make us a parable.
No. She was elderly and she was not attractive. Okay, so no, that was not it. I swear to God. You don't want to know what the parable was. It just didn't fucking work. Anyway, so this is the second episode, the second try at today's episode. And so, it happens. So we decided to go to our go-to guy, and we're going to talk about the movies of Clint Eastwood, both as actor and as director, and also as producer. He has had a remarkable impact on films and on the American psyche because he's sort of like the embodiment of the cool American. Because I think that's the best way to do it. But before we get into it, we just want to remind you, please, we'd appreciate it so much if you listen to this podcast that you pass around the link to our SoundCloud so that other people get to hear our podcast because we're trying to grow our audience, as we've told you before. So it would be much appreciated if you pass it around. And so without further ado, let's dive into Clint Eastwood. Benway, why is it that you think that Clint Eastwood is such a big deal? Is it because of his directorial work or his acting or his persona? I mean, what?
All of the above, frankly. And it was interesting that the idea of talking about Clint already kind of started from an earlier episode we had, which was Meryl Streep, because as we had said in that episode, they face to face in that film, The Bridges of Madison County, which is just a banal love story. But in seeing the performances, you can see the false idol of Meryl Streep trying to act her way out of a true idol, which is Clint Eastwood, and there's no contest. And I was thinking about that, like what makes Clint so compelling. Someone brought up a good point. Even though he's a little bit older than them, the sort of baby boomer-ish, and not necessarily truly baby boomer, but the new Hollywood crowd, Jack Nicholson's, what have you, they were saying, we have some really good actors, some of us really well known and have iconic roles, but no one is in our generation ever approached the level of icon like the old timers, your John Waynes, your Jimmy Stewarts, what have you, like Clint Eastwood did. He was like the only one of their crowd that did that.
Yeah.
And that's why they said, because none of us look great on a fucking horse. I think Bruce Dern was saying this. None of us look good on a fucking horse. The only one who did was Clint.
Yeah.
And that's the part of it.
There's a sense that he's agrarian, contrasted to the new Hollywood actors like Nicholson and all the rest of them who are more urban. You can never imagine Jack Nicholson on a horse. I think he has made a couple of westerns. Did he make a western with Marlon Brando?
Yeah, he made several westerns, some of them pretty decent, but he doesn't have that. That's not his iconic status.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm thinking of like him as a construction worker in Five Easy Pieces,
right.
or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm not thinking of him like an old broken down gunslinger trying to get on a horse. And that was a great performance. I'm talking, of course, of Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood picture. That it just worked because it was an elegy to the Western. And it worked because he was such a Western character, that slim, gaunt, chiseled features, it just...
And Unforgiven is a good film to talk through, but I think part of the weight of Unforgiven is that it has all of the history of Clint Eastwood from the 3 or 4 decades that preceded it.
Yeah.
The fact that the character in Unforgiven, a former great gunslinger who gave up this extraordinarily violent and unpleasant life and has to go back into it, works because you remember all those old Clint Eastwood movies. It's not just that, he was the man with no name. It was also that he was Dirty Harry. It was also that he was the outlaw Josie Wales, that he did all of these films.
Yeah.
And that weight brings with you. I think one of the best things that ever happened to Clint were those early spaghetti westerns. I mean, Clint was a working actor on television.
Yeah,
Rawhide. Like the show Rawhide was his basic hit, but it was just a banal TV film. But he went to Italy and did a series of films which were basically remakes of Akira Kurosawa samurai movies.
Yeah,
Yojimbo and Sanjuro, the Fistful of Dollars and a Few Dollars More. Basically, those were the plots. But something great happened during that filming, which I think gave him a boost that almost no one ever had, which was he was able to carry a whole film more or less without speaking.
Well, it was his idea. That's what's
Yeah.
interesting. He just went through the script and started removing lines. You know, what did he need to actually say in the movie? And it was just expressionless, and that's interesting. Most actors, if you ever have to deal with actors, most actors want more lines, and they'll always say, you know, something like, "Shouldn't I say something here? I feel like I should say something." Okay, that's like the typical stereotypical thing that an actor will say on set because they just want more lines. And the one time I've seen that happen was in Bugsy. That's like an inside joke. But the woman's name, I forget her character's name, Virginia Hill. She when she's introduced in the movie in Bugsy, she's filming a movie and something happens and she says, "Shouldn't I be saying something here?" That is so typical. And so for Clint Eastwood to have gone in the opposite direction of saying, "Let's just remove lines," that was really atypical. That is not what an actor usually does. And it wasn't for like laziness reasons, like somebody like Marlon Brando, who's just a lazy actor and didn't like to memorize his
Yeah,
lines.
he couldn't have too many lines written on the baby's diaper so he could read them while he was
Yeah.
looking at the baby.
Yeah, which I find just kind of pathetic. Okay, I mean it's not that goddamn hard. Okay, and it's just a little bit of effort, and you're getting paid millions of dollars for it. Come on, right? But anyway, it wasn't that. Clearly not. He was thinking that it would work for the character better to have fewer lines, to say less, to have it all in his expressiveness, and it worked beautifully. I mean, the good, the bad, the ugly. Jesus, that great pictures.
And here's the good thing about it. With these Italian pictures, and Italians, as everybody knows, when they make pictures, they figure out somebody else's hit and they reproduce it ad infinitum. They try to do it as cheap as possible. What they do spend the money on, especially when it's Sergio Leone, is the idea of the following, which is, okay, I don't have any language, so what's going to be the topic of my focus? Clint Eastwood's face. I am going to zoom in on that thing like nobody's business. It's going to be 20 feet high on the movie theater screen. I'm going to flood it with Ennio Morricone music.
Yeah.
When you're put in that situation, you remember that face.
Oh yeah.
You remember what it's doing.
Yeah, you remember
and it's almost like, you know, this is going to sound like, you know, hipster shit, but I think there's truth to it. It's almost like Andy Warhol putting Marilyn Monroe on the silk screens. You know, that level of focus on it, and it sticks in the brain.
What I find really interesting about Clint Eastwood is that, see, he was a journeyman actor. He was a working actor who slowly accreted the reputation and the stature that he had. He wasn't a breakout star. It wasn't like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. He did TV. He did all kinds of like low budget crap. He did TV and then slowly grew up. We got to remember the Sergio Leone movies. Now they're iconic. At the time, it was Basement Barrel. I mean, it was not Basement Barrel. What do you call it? Bottom of the barrel stuff. It was just low rent shit. It was fucking an Italian Western. Who does an Italian Western? Somebody who needs a paycheck, you know, and it's going to be a crappy little picture, you know. That's what was going on. The guy was just a working actor, and he just slowly grew into being a big movie star, you know. It's really interesting because there's this. I remember very clearly something rather obscure in one of the Oscars in like the '60s. See, Charlton Heston was supposed to give some award, right? And he was late. His car was stuck in traffic. And so they had Clint Eastwood standing there, and he was going to, like, you know, give the award, but he was just basically killing time until Charlton Heston showed up, right?
Right.
Because apparently his car had just arrived, and it was like backstage, and they were rushing him to the stage, right? And so he was like standing around there, and he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just like waiting around for Charlton Heston, right? And then Charlton Heston shows up, you know, and gives the award, and like it literally like running to the stage and gives the award. I think it was like best actor or best picture, something big, right? And here was the interesting thing, you know, Clint Eastwood was young, you know, he looked like he was like in his mid 30s, late 30s, maybe early 40s, okay, something like that. Because Clint Eastwood, it's hard to tell his look. But the thing is, see, what was interesting about the exchange and the moment, and you know, Charlton Heston thanked him and just like dove right into it and started saying things, and Eastwood, you know, slipped away, right? It was a trivial moment, but what was interesting was that in terms of iconography, well, those two actors never worked together, but they were of a piece. There was something iconic about them. Okay, but like granite like, because the actors or icons we have today, they are malleable, but there's something granite like, and that moment between Charlton Heston, Moses, right, Ben-Hur, and Clint Eastwood, who also had that thing,
Yeah.
that but we don't have that
Well,
anymore.
here's the thing, and it gets into his directing as well, because it's tied to this period in his life when, yeah, you're right. When he started out, those Sergio Leone movies were B pictures. By the time you got to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the sort of cult following had built up to where it actually was a big deal.
Yeah.
But at that time, he was still operating in the older world of Hollywood. Remember, I think the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the third movie, came out in '66, which is still the old studio system. New Hollywood isn't even a burp yet.
Yeah.
Coming out of that system. So what's fundamentally happening, he's still operating in the world of heroes and men in the West as this playing field of what American men could and should be. And so there's a way in which you compose yourself and the way in which you act as a human being that lends itself to your, as you said, the face of granite. There are very few actors after John Wayne who really are thought of as that iconic as John Wayne, and the only one, and it's Clint.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny because there was people of like we had said before, of that younger generation were in those movies, those Westerns with, John Wayne, what have you. Funny enough, I think one of John Wayne's later films, that Bruce Stern actually, his character kills John Wayne in one of the Western movies, I think The Cowboys or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce Stern is remembered for it, but remembered thusly, or described thusly: "You were that son of a bitch that killed my friend John." In other words, his whole existence is as a shadow of the man he shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What does that tell you? That tells you that those subsequent generations, which we are kind of articulated before, don't really occupy that, the level of the granite hero. They don't. They're not the gods. They don't walk in. They walk in the shadow of the gods, but they don't walk at the same level. Clint Eastwood walks at the level of the gods, and it sounds hyperbolic, but there's truth to that.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. He is on that level of John Wayne. And by the way, I was thinking, just before you mentioned him, as a matter of fact, did John Wayne and Clint Eastwood ever act together?
No, but at the end of the days, they were competing against each other all the time.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, the difference between the two. Because you have the pictures like the outlaw Josie Wales, and later Unforgiven, of course, that they are damaged men, just as John Wayne is damaged in The Searchers, for example, and the man who shot Liberty Valance. It's really interesting because there's a difference between the two, whereby one is more naturally cynical and the other is more like born hopeful but turned dark.
Can I tell you a great story that I think illustrates this?
Uh-huh.
This is one of my favorite John Wayne films is probably his last great film, which is The Shootist. The Shootist is about a very famous gunslinging Westerner who discovers he's dying of cancer. And he, as the course of the movie, realizes he, rather than die a shriveling mess on the floor, wants to go out in a blaze of glory. Mm-hmm. There is a scene in the filming of that movie where John Wayne needs to blow a number of guys away efficiently. Now, the director of that movie is a guy by the name of Don Siegel. Don Siegel is the guy who was basically Clint Eastwood's mentor.
Right.
Don Siegel directed the original Dirty Harry. He directed, I think, a movie called Coogan's Bluff, which is another, like one of those, like a Western cowboy detective goes to New York to solve a crime. A number of those movies, and he taught Clint how that minimalist directing attitude is like, be professional, get your shots done. You don't need 30 takes, go on and go, so forth. So in other words, this is a guy who really knew Clint. Now he's directing John Wayne, and he's telling John Wayne in this scene, like, look, just, you got to just be efficient about getting rid of these guys. So I want you to shoot this guy in the back. And John Wayne says, I don't shoot a guy in the back. Yeah. And so Don said something that perhaps he shouldn't have. He goes to John Wayne. He says, Clint would have shot him in the back. He says, "I don't care what that young kid would have done. I don't shoot a man in the back." And that he was offended by the fact that he would even suggest that. And
Yeah.
what I think that articulates a little bit of what you're saying, which is John Wayne still had there's a thing that you are allowed to do and you're not supposed to do, and the guy who knows where those boundaries are is the true hero.
Yeah.
Clint was a little bit more, I'm here to survive. If I'm
Yeah.
going to be in the West, your success as a hero is making it to the end.
Yeah.
And that's even though, like we said, there's still these iconic figures, that's the start of that difference, between the period of the perfect man, even though he has to your point, his flaws weight him down and he feels guilty over them, versus a guy like Clint who says, I have certain flaws, but I gotta, we all have to just kind of make do and survive.
Yeah,
And
because
it's that cold.
even at the end, John Wayne is striving towards an idealized man, whereas the Clint Eastwood character is just like accepting his flaws and just carrying them out. I mean, like in Unforgiven, he shoots a man in the face who's already been shot, who's already unarmed. There's no reason to shoot him, and in point of fact, there's reason to care for him and try to help him. But no, out of revenge, he kills him. The Gene Hackman character.
Right.
Yeah, there's a fundamental cynicism, darkness to it. Yeah, I mean, evil, if you get right down to it. There is a sense that the Clint Eastwood character is often an evil man, whereas the John Wayne character is always striving to be good, even when he acts in evil ways, like in The Searchers, when he shoots out the eyes of the Comanche, so that the Comanche will not.
His soul can't find the way to the spirit land. He wanders between the winds.
Yeah, he doesn't believe it. He's a Christian, but he does it anyway, just out of spite, out of meanness, out of cruelty. And that's, but he's still striving towards it. I mean, like at The Searchers, the hysteria of The Searchers. You don't know at the end whether he's going to, hug the girl or kill her. It's psychotic.
And to just give people a little bit of heads up why The Searchers is great and why I think people in our crowd would like it. The basic premise of that movie is John Wayne, who is a Confederate soldier, veteran, visiting his family in Texas. His family gets slaughtered, and the young girl in the family gets abducted by the Indians, and he's trying to rescue her before she's mated with the Indians, because she will basically be consumed and tainted by them.
Yeah.
And throughout that ending, you worry that, like, if he finds her and she's tainted, is he going to kill her?
Yeah.
And I won't, spoil it all, but needless to say, when the ending does come, you still get the sense that despite all of this horrendous hatred in the man, he recognizes that there's a part of him that realizes that sin has to be punished. You know what I mean? Like, he still has to follow the orders. So the ending of the film, when there's a reunification, he can't bring himself to enter the threshold of the house, where everybody is, whole again. It's like Moses can't get into the promised land kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Moses recognizes he can't get into the promised land, and thus John Wayne recognizes that I've probably committed sins and I am worthy of being punished. I mean, that's a man still operating under the strict moral code.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Well, going back to Clint Eastwood, his acting career. Okay, so he starts off as this is sort of like a TV actor, no biggie, does westerns. Rawhide is a hit, and by the way, TV shows are not hits because of the actors. It's because of the writing and the production, and the actors are usually along for the ride. And it just so happens that a particular TV show becomes a big hit, and so it was his big break was Rawhide. The fact that Rawhide was a successful show. But then after Rawhide, he goes into the spaghetti westerns, and then he goes into these urban films, the Dirty Harry pictures, Dirty Harry, Magnum Force, and he forms Malpaso Production Company. That is I think it's a real turning point, because he started, like the smarter actors, he started realizing that he had to control the material. Because, he'd wind up being in all kinds of crap that, that would pay the bills, but his career would go down the tube. So the only way for an actor to really control your career is to have his own production company, which he did with Malpaso. And he starts, doing these films and getting behind these filmmakers. And that's when things got really interesting, because not only does he start directing, his first directing picture was Play Misty for Me. But he starts producing other up-and-coming directors, and of course the most famous one was Michael Cimino in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. That I think is like the pinnacle of the urban Clint. You know what I mean? Because there's the
Right.
cowboy Clint of the Italian spaghetti westerns, right? And then there's the urban Clint, and that's Dirty Harry and all the rest of it. I always feel that Thunderbolt and Lightfoot was the pinnacle of urban Clint. You know what I mean? Even more than the
It's
Dirty
inter-
Harry pictures.
Well, that's interesting because my thought would have gone to Dirty Harry. And here's the thing: is I don't think there's a difference, but there's also a relationship between that Western Clint and the urban Clint. And what I often say is this: the urban Clint is basically, I'm going to take this Western cowboy and I'm going to put him in the contemporary setting to highlight the absurdities of the contemporary setting. You know,
Yeah.
rather than say, yeah, because one of his early, I would say one of his first movies on that front, movie, The Name of Coogan's Blood, is literally a guy with a fucking 10-gallon hat going into New York to solve crime. It's like a cowboy going in there. I'm sorry, not the good, the bad, the ugly. Dirty Harry is that way too.
Yeah.
In fact, what's interesting about Clint's urban characters is, and you got to give credit to this, because it's hard to do. He's a right-wing rebel.
Yeah.
In all of those.
Yeah, he's a right-wing rebel, yeah. Because he was clearly political from the get-go.
Right.
I mean,
absolutely.
You agree with it? Because
a Dirty Harry, and it's funny to those, probably most people don't even know this. Dirty Harry freaked people the fuck out when it came out.
Yeah.
They, Pauline Kael,
yeah, she had a hissy fit, yeah.
Yeah, she had a hissy fit, but she liked the movie, but she had a hissy fit. She basically, famous New Yorker critic, called Dirty Harry a work of fascist art.
Yeah.
And she meant it very honestly. Like, she thought, like, Clint, because as people know in Dirty Harry, the cop who, doesn't follow the rules but is going to get the bad guy. And John Milius summed it up perfectly. He says, look, people of that ilk understand the fundamental truth, which is we don't need the law to tell us what's right and wrong. We know it fundamentally as human beings.
Which is accurate.
It's the aesthetic approach, or the aesthetic approach to judgment and decision making, and that arguably is it's a very right wing position, certainly not left wing. And what's interesting about it, that like half the battle of Harry, yes, he's basically trying to hunt down a proxy of the Zodiac killer, but his other enemy is the state. The apparatus of the city structures itself in a way that it will never help citizens. It will help the perpetrators of crime against citizens. And Harry is the force that recognizes this and is willing to operate outside of the legal strictures that would make a liberal society. And that's a cowboy, effectively. That is the honest cowboy who knows right and wrong, going into a world that doesn't.
Yeah. It's interesting, he could make the transition to an urban setting in a way that John Wayne could not.
That's interesting, yeah. Say a little bit more about that, because I actually don't remember or can't think of an urban John Wayne film other than him doing World War II pictures.
No, I'm offhand. Oh, let me look it up real quick on IMDb. But I cannot recall offhand him doing a Western. I mean, an urban movie. But I know that he did. I remember seeing him in a suit, like doing like an urban movie. But I just can't recall it. You know what I mean?
But I think that underlines your point. Right? I mean, like, even if he did it, you can't even think of it. You can't even conceive of it.
Yeah. Because McHugh.
Because I'll tell you the thing that because it's the film that proves
McHugh.
you right.
McHugh.
Okay.
He's like basically Seattle cop Lon McHugh investigates the murder of his best friend and the corruption within the police department. It's John Sturges' picture. It's with Eddie Albert. I remember him, but it didn't fit. It was like an ill-fitting suit, even though John Wayne wore a suit like nobody's business. I mean, he was a handsome guy. He was a...
Because I'll tell you, the closest thing I could think of to him in a contemporary film is The Quiet Man, and that's him going to Ireland. So it doesn't even fit there.
Yeah.
It's almost ancient European.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the John goes, well, that's part of John Wayne, which is a man completely out of his contemporary time. John Wayne just lives in the West. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood, to your point, he can come to the contemporary world, but he bears with him the West when he does so, which is, I think, part of the reason he is so compelling. And I think the other thing I want to give him credit for, and this is kind of going beyond the actor into the filmmaker, is I think Clint is unquestionably, without competition, the only and most important successor to John Ford.
I was wondering about that because did Clint Eastwood ever act in a John Ford picture?
He did not. I'm 99% sure he did not.
Yeah, because I cannot recall offhand that he did. I think I would have remembered, right? And when
it would have been a big deal. They would have promoted the hell out of it.
Yeah, and because John Ford, he didn't, because John Ford. Okay, for those 3 people who don't know, well, actually, there's a lot more because people are starting to forget who John Ford was. He is a 4-time Oscar-winning director. 4 times. And Spielberg's only done it twice. He had a huge career, and he was famous for his westerns. And Peter Bogdanovich and a lot of the New Wave, French New Wave people studied the hell out of John Ford because he was a very minimalist director. And he was, there's no question that he was an artist and a self-conscious artist, but a very underhanded artist, if you will, because he really hated calling himself an artist. He didn't identify himself as such. One time at some Directors Guild of America meeting, he stood up and said, "I'm John Ford and I make westerns." I mean, he felt that he was just a genre filmmaker. But it's undoubtedly, indisputably, that a lot of his best pictures, like The Searchers, like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, were real works of art. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is one of the more, I think, sophisticated pictures about the press and myth and democratic politics. I can't think of a picture that is as intelligent about those issues offhand. I mean,
only one picture comes close to getting that vibe, and it's not even a Western truly. It's Ace in the Hole. It's a Billy Wilder.
I never saw that.
So that it hits it. It gets the circus of the media and the how you manipulate emotions and feelings, and it's good. I'll just leave it at that because I know I share most people actually haven't seen that. I think more people have seen John Ford movies, but just look at it if you have a chance to see it. Look at it's readily available now.
Okay. That being that said, John Ford's pictures were very minimalist. Okay, like who's a maximalist? Like somebody like Martin Scorsese. You're aware of his shots. Somebody like, for example, David Fincher. The shots are subtle, but they draw attention to themselves. You see them, right? But John Ford shots, you don't notice them. It seems perfectly natural. You get the sense that you, as a spectator, just happen to be plopped in there and are looking at exactly what you should be looking at any given moment, which is an exceptionally difficult thing to do. That's why the guy won 4 Oscars, okay? Because truly, to be so simple that you are invisible as a director is incredibly hard, okay? And he does it. He does it, all the time, and with a casual grace that's why he got 4 fucking Oscars, okay? Clint Eastwood does the same.
And here's the thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And here's the thing, especially John Ford, other directors and super talented filmmakers, the showy filmmakers, recognized that he was the man they had to learn from.
Yeah.
Orson Welles understood it.
Yeah.
Peter Bogdanovich understood it. Martin Scorsese fucking understands it for sure.
Yeah.
He mentions it all the time because he's a student of film history as much as anything.
Yeah.
Clint gets that too.
Yeah.
Clint is, and people recognize it in Clint as well. And here's the thing that they also share. Clint and John Ford are hyper-focused in all of their movies. Not to say this is their only focus, but they're hyper-focused on what it means to be an American male, a masculine American male.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
One other guy does it as well. Howard Hawks. There's a small group of guys who do it, and it's mostly John Ford and in our time Clint, because there's no one else who really does it. Can you think of any other
Howard Hawks?
Really
It was more in keeping with the times. It was a more masculine time. So that doesn't it's not as noticeable. And also, what John Ford was much more sophisticated in his vision than Howard Hawks. I mean, and not to say that Howard Hawks was not a great director, and his partnership with Humphrey Bogart was, something else. But John Ford was no, he's a great man, The Searchers is a John Ford picture, right? And his use of landscape and his oh man, there's so many things about him that are just terrific. And the problem also is that, see, you see him now and you don't understand his significance because so many contemporary directors have built on his work and what he did and the way he would approach shots and the way he would approach a scene. And so you watch him and you say, this is so old-fashioned. But you don't realize that it's the building blocks of what you are seeing today, okay? So
I'll give you an example. Like, there's a simple movie that he did from 1939, which is a magic year in movies as well. Stagecoach.
Right.
All of your fundamental building blocks of what an action movie is, those sequences, how you cut from point to point, it's all stolen from The Searchers.
Yeah.
Stagecoach. Stagecoach is literally like a couple guys on a stagecoach trying to get from point A to point B, and there's conflict that ensues.
Yeah.
That's basically the movie.
Yeah.
But the action and the shooting sequences, and frankly, that's one of John Wayne's early movies where this guy's a fucking star.
Yeah.
Kind of thing happens. All of the building, everything. I mean, like, for example, you're gonna say I'm crazy, but in my mind, like a movie like Die Hard is within the fucking vernacular of The Searchers. It just feels like that.
Oh no, I mean, but also the what's his name? The director of Die Hard. His name is slipping in my mind right now. The great
McTiernan, John McTiernan.
John McTiernan, great director. But you can tell that there are a few shots in Die Hard that are homages to John Ford. I mean, you can tell that he was just ripping him off, but like in a very affectionate and respectful way. I mean, he clearly knows who the big guy is. Okay, and McTiernan was. I would venture to say that Die Hard is of the contemporary action pictures the best of the bunch, and it set the standard of all the other action pictures. I mean, everybody since Die Hard has basically been trying to make Die Hard 2. That's what everybody does. I mean,
that's true. Yeah.
But
and that's and so, but needless to say, that's so when we go into all of these details and all the influence of John Ford, that's to stress the importance of John Ford simultaneously stresses how important entity Clint Eastwood is when I tell you that he is the only true successor.
Yeah.
To John Ford.
Because what's interesting about Clint Eastwood as a director, okay, let's break it down. Like insofar as there are two sides to it. There's the artistic side and the business side. The business side, the practical aspects of filmmaking. Okay, that's what I mean by it. Okay, now one of the things that you admire about Clint Eastwood is that, first of all, he's a fast director. He doesn't wait around to figure out what his shots are. He usually shows up on set with a shot list that he's already figured out with his director of photography. Right, so they know what they're going to be shooting that day. They don't just sit around and just make it up on the spot, which a lot of directors do. Michael Cimino did that, and it was a fucking nightmare. Okay, so Clint Eastwood shows up with a clear shot list. He's very simple. He goes master shot close-ups. He doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. Right? He rarely has any kind of tracking shot. It's usually tripod, looking at a particular scene. Sometimes he'll follow a character so as to go into a close-up, but it's a very invisible one. It's what's known as the Spielberg oneer, which is basically stitching together several individual shots into one shot, usually trying to make it as simple and invisible as possible, something that's not noticeable, right? Now, the other thing about Clint Eastwood is that he does very few takes, okay? Much like Woody Allen, by the way, who's another minimalist director. In the sense of being very simple and not trying to be flashy at all and trying to sort of almost get out of the way of what's going on. And here is the key issue that a lot of actors have said about Clint Eastwood, and he's famous for, is that he says actors are horses, and so he keeps a very, very quiet set, because when he was working in westerns, you had the horses, right? And the directors would yell action, and it would scare the horses. And the first thing that would happen in the shot was, the director would scream action, the horses would jump, and the actors would have to soothe the horses, right? And before they were able to get into the fucking scene. And so he, from that, realized that what he had to do was just basically ease into a scene for the actors and not yell at them, not scream at them, treat them like horses. And it's very effective, because what actors say is that he is constantly, he basically says, oh, whenever you're ready, okay, we're rolling, and at most he'll say, in a very soft voice and not even directed at anybody, so like almost walking away, he's saying, and accione, and that's it. And that kind of easing into a scene for an actor is very effective, because actors are stressed out. They're very stressed out. Sometimes you can tell because the performance is a bit hysterical, because they have all these people focused on them. And it is an incredibly stressful occupation to have cameras, people, all of them staring at you, waiting for you to deliver, because they've been, setting up a shot, setting up a camera for possibly several hours, sometimes days. They are waiting for you to deliver, and they are staring at you. And if you fuck up, all of their work is for nothing, okay? And it can be like shit, like some complex pyrotechnic shot or something like that. And if you, as the actor, fuck it up, it's going to be days for them to redo it and get the shot ready, okay? So it's very stressful for actors. And Clint Eastwood knows this, and that's why he gets such naturalistic performances. Because I have never seen a Clint Eastwood picture where the actors are bad. I mean, have you?
No, I can't recall. In fact, everything you said highlights something I think is very important here, which is the business of how you manage filmmaking manifests itself in the art of your filmmaking as well. Because you think about it, when a guy is committed to saying, I'm only going to do a few shots, we're going to make it very quickly, I'm not going to go overly complicate things with the shots. What is that telling you? It's telling you he has a strong confidence in the material, a confidence that he selected the right people for the role, a confidence that he can tell them what to do and they'll do it. Yeah. That manifests itself in the art. I mean, it's like, I know it's he can go in and say, look, I know this picture of a guy having a Wild West show in the 70s and 80s America is going to be compelling.
Yes.
So that's the movie Bronco Billy. I know that a guy with a cop who's taking care of an orangutan is going to be compelling. That's Every Which Way But Loose.
That was a funny movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's right. He fundamentally is right. He knows it. But that isn't also to say his films are visually uncompelling either.
No, they're very compelling.
Because like John Ford, Clint Eastwood knows the importance of an individual amidst the landscape and how it reinforces the situation or the drama at play.
Yeah.
Unforgiven, the vistas in Unforgiven are as memorable as anything in The Searchers.
Yeah.
The wilderness in
Outlaw Josie Wales.
Outlaw Josie Wales, is intimately tied to the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he is. I would venture to say that he's up there in terms of. Actually, no. Let me rephrase it, because I was going to say that he was equal to John Ford, but John Ford invented this whole thing, whereas he's a diligent follower of John Ford. So I can't say that they're in the same league, because you got to give the inventor his due, and John Ford really did invent that kind of minimalist directing. Okay, that kind of just clean, minimal, invisible directing that every director who knows what they're doing, slowly comes to realize that this guy is a fucking genius. It's the morons who don't know what they're doing, who say, oh, that's so stupid, oh, that's so old-fashioned, or whatever. They don't understand the craft of what John Ford is doing. But the guys who actually have directed, they realize it. And audiences realized it, too, at the time, because all of his pictures, all of John Ford's pictures, were huge successes. Clint Eastwood has had continued commercial success, precisely because he, how can I put it? First of all, he picks good material. but he's confident in the material. And here's an interesting story. In like 81 or 82, when David Peoples was hitting his stride as a screenwriter, he did Blade Runner and some other pictures.
Right.
He bought Unforgiven, the script of Unforgiven. It was originally called The Killing of William Money or something like that, or something. It was a different title. It wasn't Unforgiven. But it was sort of like, the outlaw Josie Wales, but the murders of William Money or something like that. And he bought the script, and he paid for a series of rewrites, okay, of the original script, because that's very typical. You buy a script as a producer, and you don't like different elements for whatever reason, and you hire the same writer or different writers to rewrite it. And you go through a process of rewrites, and sometimes this process leads absolutely nowhere, and that's what happened to the Unforgiven script. It went nowhere. He was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with each draft that he was commissioning. And then he read the first draft, the original draft, and he was like, this is what I want to shoot. Why am I doing this? And it was from then that he started this thing of not rewriting the scripts. Here's the interesting story, though. He bought the script, and he knew that he couldn't do it when he bought the script. He was too young. And he consciously decided that he was going to leave it for a few years before he did it. And he said at least 10 years, and which is what he did, by the way. But here's the point. So this process of him realizing that rewriting scripts led nowhere, led down a rabbit hole, because it does. Okay, and sometimes, very occasionally, going down that rabbit hole leads to masterpieces like Tootsie. But that's very rare. Most of the time, excessive rewrites, it just makes it bland and goes nowhere, with a lot of logical fallacies, a lot of plot holes in the picture, right? It doesn't really help it most of the time. It's the rare picture that does well. But he was smart enough to realize this, and he realized it in the early 80s, because this process with Unforgiven happened around like 82, right? Notice that. That's important, because it's from then that all of his pictures as director were really fucking strong, okay? The only other picture that as a producer he'd left alone had been Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. But Thunderbolt and Lightfoot had indisputably one of the best scripts ever written. I mean, that script really is unbelievably good. And Michael Cimino, I mean, say what you will, but he was a great director, okay? I mean, he was flashy as fuck, and pretentious and all the rest of it, yes, but he was a great director. But because I'm thinking of certain shots on Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, specifically that long conversation on the back of that tour boat that's going down the river, and he shot it with an incredibly long lens, and the scene is like 4 minutes long, and it was just so goddamn good, and it was a continuous shot with this incredibly long lens, that blew out the entire background. It's just like a spectacular shot. But anyway, I'm going all over the place.
But remember Clint Eastwood was the babysitter on that production as well. Yeah. Clint Eastwood said, as soon as you start going over 2 takes, Clint's like, nope, fuck you, you're done.
yeah, he was because he was the producer. So yeah, he was able to rein in Cimino. That unfortunately was the only truly successful Cimino production, because I don't consider Heaven's Gate The Deer Hunter, a successful production. I think that was just pretentious and stupid. But anyway, he if only he'd had somebody to rein him in, he would have had such an incredible career. But anyway, Clint Eastwood, he has a North Star. He understands, he's grounded some way that allows him to be self-confident insofar as certain things are concerned, like scripts. His scripts he let them be. Sometimes that led to pictures that were undercooked. Like, for instance, Sully, that's a recent picture of his, right? The script was kind of crappy. It could have used with a couple of rewrites, like to hone in on what it was about, like Invictus, same thing. There are several Clint Eastwood pictures that the script was just undercooked, okay? But which do you prefer, an overcooked script or an undercooked script?
Precisely. I mean, it's I eat my meat medium rare. I think you could figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, like my thinking is like I would prefer to have a somewhat slight picture, like Sully was. The Sully is a great example of this, because it is a slight picture. It's a little bit cartoonish and a little bit silly because the reality was totally different. Because the transportation board, they thought that the character Sully was a fucking god, because they knew that nobody could have pulled off that. Okay. And it was just, I mean, it was prima facie, it was obvious that the guy was a truly great pilot and really had saved the lives of all those people. And you know, it was, you know, there wasn't any drama. That was manufactured drama. What?
Right. And Clint Eastwood has this amazing ability, and this is going to sound like faint praise, but it is actually something I credit him. Anybody who can make even their slight movies so compelling is amazing to me.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of like little dull movies, or shall we say, I mean, if they're not necessarily dull, because I actually find them interesting to watch, but let's just say minor films like Space Cowboys, you know, which is about old, you know, NASA astronauts.
But you know that was his biggest budget picture?
I know, and it actually, I think it did well.
Yeah.
But it's a slight, you know, from a narrative perspective, pretty slight. Absolute Power.
That was silly.
Blood work. You know, all these little things. You know,
Absolute Power but it was a great Gene Hackman performance. Yeah, I love Gene Hackman. I miss him very much. You know,
he's still alive, but I mean, he's retired.
He's self-consciously retired. Yeah, but yeah, going back to Unforgiven with Gene Hackman, who deservedly got an Oscar for that role, because Jesus Christ, it was an extraordinary performance because he was so goddamn charming. He was this charming guy, but not like a leering charm. Okay, it was this casual, like, I'm a charming guy, you know, and I always remember like the scene in Unforgiven where, which no other contemporary director would have handled the same way. The scene in the picture where Little Bill, the Gene Hackman character, is talking to the head of the prostitutes, right? The madam of the whorehouse, right? Mm-hmm. And he's telling her, look, these boys, they're not bad boys, you know, they just got a little unruly, come on. And, you know, just trying to ease, you know, smooth out the situation, right? And this is the bad guy in the movie, right? A contemporary director would have had Gene Hackman beat up the madam of the whorehouse, okay? A contemporary director would try to show off what a bad guy he was. Clint Eastwood was confident enough and realized it would be much more interesting if the sheriff is trying to smooth the way, because the sheriff in reality would realize they all have to live together, right? So he needs to, you know, a little bit of honey to grease the situation. You know, I'm mixing my metaphors, but you know what I mean.
Well, what's interesting about that character, the Little Bill character, is incredibly interesting. He is a villain, and he manifests and exhibits in the movie horrendous actions, but fundamentally he's operating under the idea that I'm here to preserve the order of this little community, and I'm going to do it. And he functions like a guy, like you see him building, like, hey, I'm putting a roof on my house, and I'm not too good with the craftsmanship, so it's leaking, but hey, I'm trying. And it's just an average guy. Like I think Clint Eastwood even influenced this. Said model him after like Darrell F. Gates. Darrell F. Gates was the guy who was the head of the Los Angeles Police Department. And he was head of the police department during a number of scandals, but he was basically a decent guy. So you simultaneously have a character who's fundamentally decent, you know, just like, you know, like a easygoing guy, but at the same time, he will nearly shoot a man to death. He will beat a man to death. Yeah. In the case of one of the characters. Yeah. He will say a line like when, you know, the whores raise some ransom to hire, you know, the William Moneys of the world to kill the guys that, you know, cut up one of their fellow whores, Delilah. Mm-hmm. You know, and Little Bill is saying, you know, literally, he says, I mean, I should kill them fucking whores, or kill them whores. And he says it in passing, but he says it as like you could believe that this man would do it. Yeah, you know, he would kill the whores to preserve the society. And so what that tells you, because I think Clint Eastwood has a lot of credit to this in addition to the script. Mm-hmm. Clint Eastwood fundamentally knows the human character as such. He understands that there is not necessarily in this world a pure villain, even if there is something that's objectionably villain. You know, there's no way to say it's not villainous. Like, I think Little Bill does a lot of objectively villainous things. Oh, no question. It simultaneously exists in a man who wants to preserve and help his community. Yeah, yeah.
There's no sense. I mean, he is a villain, but at the same time, in his own mind, he is the hero, and he's the decent guy, and he's doing the best he can, and he's making sure that all the people in his community are protected. When he beats the ever living shit out of the English Bob, right?
Yeah.
You know, he he does it to send the message that any assassin who comes to his town is going to get this treatment. It's not for no reason. Okay, and now of course that's a credit to the script, but it's a credit also to the Clint Eastwood, because there's this great scene, this great moment rather, at the end of that scene. He beats the ever living shit out of him, right? I mean, in public, right in front of him. I mean, just goes to town on the guy, right? And everybody, and he just says, this is what's going to happen to any assassin. You tell anybody who comes around this way that this is what happens to assassins, right? Who come to our town.
And it's a
but
very,
but
and
hang
it's a
on,
very,
hang on. This is the key scene, the key moment for me at least, is that he's looking around and he's troubled by what he has had to do, and he's like looking around at all the people staring at him, and they're staring at him with fear, and he doesn't like that because he doesn't want people to be afraid of him. And so he says, "Go on, scat," and just like trying to make it, trying to get them to stop staring at him as the bad guy, because he is not the bad guy. He is doing something that he views as necessary and positive for his community. I thought it's a trivial moment, but oh man, for me, it's really powerful.
It's not, because fundamentally it's a very important moment, because fundamentally he understands the reality of the situation that the horrors have brought upon the community, which is when you raise big money like that to claim ahead, you are going to get people who are not out for your own good. They're actually very dangerous people. People are going to be even worse than the guys who drunkenly cut a whore's face.
Yeah.
And those guys are William Money. And this is what Clint is also smart enough to do. Even though William Money, Clint Eastwood's character, has our sympathy, he's trying to reform himself. He recognizes in his past the horrendous things he did. There's a scene, and this is great minimalist acting by Clint. It's just him staring into a fire saying, "Hey, Ned, the Morgan Freeman character. Do you remember
the great campfire scenes, by the way? I mean, that's after that campfire scene, what other campfire scene can you fucking have? Oh man, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
He remembers in his past. He says, "Remember that guy who pissed me off? I can't, I don't know his name. I can't even remember what he did to piss me off, but I shot him through the head, and I could remember seeing the teeth coming out the back of his head, and it's shocking." He says, "I can't even recall what the man did to offend me."
Yeah,
yeah. So haunted by that, and little Bill knows that William Money is that man, who is able to do those things.
Yeah.
The irony of the situation, and this is the tragedy of Unforgiven, is that the fundamental dynamics of these logical thinkings, William Money Little Bill trying to protect his community by prejudicially thinking that certain people are going to operate a certain way, fundamentally recreates or ensures that what he terribly fears is going to happen happens.
Yeah. And I remember that great line at the end of the movie, near the end of the movie, but at the end of Little Bill, just before he gets shot by William Money, he says, "I was building a house, and it's really I was building a home. I was building this community," because he recognizes that William Money brought the apocalypse to the town of Big Whiskey. What was it called?
Big Whiskey.
Yeah.
And he says, "I don't deserve this, to die like this." Yeah. And Bill says, William Money says, "Deserves got nothing to do with this." And I think I also remember, and this also tells you the self-awareness of the characters. And when Little Bill is dying and says, "I'll see you in hell, William Money," and William Money says, "Yeah, you will."
Yeah.
That's where I'm going.
He doesn't even say, "Yeah, you will." He says, "Yeah." I mean, like,
he just says, "Yeah."
It's like a complete resignation that he knows that he will burn. Oh,
and there's an earlier bit in the movie that's also amazing, and this is the minimalist nature of how powerful minor gestures are and how an actor of the caliber of Clint would understand how to make it work. So the story of William Money throughout is, even though he has this past, but his Christian wife reformed it out of him, and he's trying to be a decent guy. The only reason he's even going after this money is because his family's starving, his farm isn't doing well, and he just needs the money to help save his kids.
Yeah.
He can barely handle, being, just in it. He can't shoot straight. He doesn't even, when he shoots one of the guys who, kill or slit up the face of the whore, he feels sorry for what he's done. And people even beat the shit out of him. Like Little Bill beats the shit out of Money to say, get the fuck out of this town. None of that even phases him until and in parallel to this is like, he's, the symbolic manifestation of his desire to be a pure human is he doesn't drink. He won't accept a drink.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout this story, he's refusing the drink, and think of that drink as a proxy for his mental state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up until, everything's going fine until they kill his friend and they put him out on display. Then he doesn't say anything. He doesn't get angry. He just pulls out the whiskey bottle and starts drinking.
Mm.
All he does is start drinking, and then, but it speaks volume. It's as if he screeched across the landscape. That's how powerful and how loud that minimal scene is.
Yeah, and that script is so fucking good, because like there's this the beautiful, beautiful scene where William Money is standing by that oak tree with the Schofield kid, right? Who's the blind, pseudo Billy the Kid character who's he's a moron, right? But he's the one who shoots one of the guys, and he can't get over it. He cannot get over the fact of what he has done. He knows that he has transgressed in a way because he'd been dreaming of being a gunfighter. He probably read the Penny Dreadfuls that the Saul Rubinek character had been writing, right? And he dreamed about being a gunfighter, and then he actually went and killed somebody, and he could not get over it. And he says, I keep seeing his face,
And taking a shit. I killed him when he was taking a shit.
Yeah, and he's like laughing. I mean, he's hysterical, clearly. And I don't know who that actor was. He'd never got big, unfortunately, but he was a good actor. I mean, good performance. And that scene, I remember it clearly. I can recite it. Clint Eastwood goes. He's staring off at this horse that's approaching with one of the whores who's bringing them the money. And he says, a hell of a thing killing a man. You take away all he's got and all he's ever going to have. Right. And the Schofield kid, swigs up from the bottle of whiskey and says, well, he had it coming. And Clint Eastwood says, we all got it coming, kid. Oh, man, that was just fucking chilling. It's so fucking chilling because, like in a realistic, neo-realistic way, it's completely absurd. But in terms of like parable, like biblical parable almost. Fucking A. It works.
And that scene is why I say that Clint walks with the gods. That scene would easily fit and sit in a standard place with the great scenes of the classic westerns. That's as epic as John Wayne's lines in The Searchers. He says like, my favorite line in The Searchers, like, we'll follow them, or we'll keep, stay up to them, or we'll find them as soon as, what is that, the way he phrased it? We'll find them. It's as sure as the turning of the earth. Yeah.
No. That scene, let me see because there are a couple of scenes in that
one. Well,
I
think the end after William Money has his drinks and says, I'm back, baby. It's the best manifestation of the Godfather 3 line. It's like, just as soon as I thought I was out, they pull me back in. That's essentially what that phrase was meant to mean. When William Money just goes ape shit, and starts blowing everybody.
He's drunk away. because that's the thing he kept saying, that he was drunk most of the time. And the other one, they're talking about like Little Bill is talking about how English Bob shot some people at some bar. And they were all drunk when it happened. And he was saying, and he was standing over him, and he took it real slow because he was drunk. And then he shot him right through the liver, Right. And the thing is, that was the thing, that alcohol played such a huge role. They were all wasted all the time when they were doing all this crazy shit. And, there's a metaphor, symbolism, because they're drunk on what? Are they drunk on power? Because that's the thing. Because it's not alcohol, of course. Are they drunk on power? Are they drunk on the freedom that they have of the West, of the lawlessness, and that civilization turns them into teetotalers, i.e., turns them into people who have reined in their own freedom. It's an interesting conundrum.
And it was also that the legendary figures that you think of are legendary through matters of luck. Largely, who was the one steady enough?
Oh yeah, because the guy's hand blew up. The guy's gun blew up in his hand. Right.
Exactly. And I remember, like, when they ended that movie after Clint's character just, I'm taking vengeance on this fucking town. I remember when he's leaving, and he's guarding himself. He says, "Any man shoot at me, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill his wife. I'm going to burn his house down." Everything. And it's just shocking. It's like, yeah, he would do that.
Yes, he would.
I just saw him do something like that. And he says, and it's funny is, like, he's doing that. He's raging in the most horrific villainous kind of way, like the worst cowboy you'd ever want to run into the West, the worst lawlessness, criminal you'd ever want to encounter. And he's being watched by the whore who was cut up, the one who has faith in him because, before Clint lost his mind, as a result of what they did to his friends, he was saying how he was trying to be true to his wife. And, he's, even though this woman is cut up, he says, I think you're not ugly like me because I have internal scars or something. I forget exactly how he phrased it. He was trying to be very kind to her, and she's like simultaneously realizing, well, I saw the humanity in this guy, and now I'm seeing the devil himself, get out of the street.
Yeah. That is an indisputably great movie. I mean, and it richly deserved all the accolades it got at the time, because it really was. It was just, script, actor, director. It was just the intersection of just, you don't get another shot. There are a couple of things I'm not crazy about, because even a masterpiece has things that you can learn from. I think that it's over edited in a couple of spots. They do too many shots, too many cuts. Like specifically, like the showdown between English Bob and Little Bill in the jail cell. The cutting is too fast and too many shots, as opposed to letting each shot linger longer. Okay, but that's just minor stuff. I mean, like I've seen it so many times that I can nitpick. Okay,
exactly. Well, here's the other thing you have to give it credit for. Correct me if I'm wrong. Outside of the show Deadwood, which I think is heavily indebted to Unforgiven.
Oh yeah.
There is no great Western that comes after Unforgiven.
No. It's the capstone of the genre.
It's the bookend. Yeah.
Realistically, you as a filmmaker, I honestly do not see how anybody in his right mind could do a Western after that one. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, Clint Eastwood never did.
Western. Yeah, Clint never made another Western, and there are some good Westerns that come after it, some recent ones. But no, I think Bone Tomahawk actually comes very close to being a very great Western. I don't think it's as good as Unforgiven.
I haven't seen it.
It's pretty good. But it's one of those Westerns that's willing to accept that the Indians are savages in some instances.
Well, yeah, they should. I mean, that's the thing that people always forget about the goddamn fucking Indians. That they were savages. They were savages, and they slaughtered one another, and they were fucking cannibals. That's something else that people conveniently ignore. I mean, come on. Like, they slaughtered one another mercilessly. Okay, that's the reality. Okay,
I just take my word for it. You'd love Bone Tomahawk.
I'll check it out.
It's not as good as Unforgiven. I'm not gonna lie.
Look, no other Clint Eastwood picture. There are few pictures that I can think of since 1991's Unforgiven that come close. I mean, can you offhand recall a picture that is as morally complex as Unforgiven? Now that's the script. The script was fucking brilliant. But tell me some other picture that comes close to it insofar as moral complexity.
I mean, I'm sure they exist. I just haven't. I can't think of it so readily because it's so compelling. Now, I will say though, I'll give Clint this, because I do think Clint did continue to make great pictures afterwards. In fact, I think his very next picture was also a great one.
Well, that's
not in the Line of Fire. It's A Perfect World.
Yeah, we're gonna have an argument about that one, because it wanted to be more than it actually delivered. Okay, you could tell it was a very ambitious picture, ambitious script, ambitiously directed. It just didn't land. They were like great punches, but they didn't land. You know what I mean? I don't have a problem with it. Okay, like it's not like a picture that I despise or something. I admire the artistic gumption of the picture of really trying. Okay, and coming awfully close, but it just didn't land. You know, because there was something lacking about it. We can argue, we can talk about it, but we've gone over an hour, and there are a couple of other pictures that I want to talk about. But what do you think of Perfect World?
Well, I think A Perfect World is actually a damn strong and fine movie. I actually think it captures that sort of
actually.
Americana.
Let's do something. Let's have an episode devoted to that, because to tell you the truth, I'm interested in A Perfect World because it is of a group of pictures that are failed masterpieces. Like, I would argue that Apocalypse Now is the greatest of the failed masterpieces, and in its way, it is a masterpiece, but it's a failure. And I find pictures that are artistic failures to be very compelling because they don't quite. Okay, Coppola, for example, he did the big four of his career: Godfather, The Conversation, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now. Right? Now, of those four pictures, the most spectacular, without question, is Apocalypse Now. A spectacular in the sense of literal spectacle. Right? The most minimalist is The Conversation. Now, The Conversation is brilliant, and it works on every level, right? The Godfather 2, one could argue, is his greatest picture. I mean, if I were to rank them, I'd say Godfather 2, The Conversation, Godfather, and then Apocalypse Now, okay? You could argue about The Conversation and Godfather 1, right, and flip them around, but I think that we're all in agreement that Godfather 2 is the absolute pinnacle in terms of artistry and moral complexity and you know, like all kinds of yummy, chewy stuff that guys like you and me love to argue about and talk about, right? And think about. Apocalypse Now is a failure. It didn't, because the end sequence doesn't work, okay? It comes close. It's like a really good Band-Aid, really good plastic surgery, but it doesn't land the way that the rest of the picture is promising, okay? My feeling is that The Perfect World is sort of like that. It's a picture that has all of the elements to be truly great, has some terrific scenes, just brilliant performances all around. Everybody's great in the picture, okay? Even Laura Dern, whom I hate. Everything is great about the picture, but it just doesn't make it. And I'm interested in dissecting such pictures to understand where the flaw was. You know what I mean? Does this make any sense to you?
It does, even though I will argue when that episode comes that I don't think it's flawed that way.
Okay, but the other pictures that I want to talk about of Clint Eastwood are $1 Million Baby and Gran Torino.
I do as well, particularly Gran Torino. I was going to make the case that I think Clint made the fundamental film of this era. If you want to call it the Trump era, you can. I think Gran Torino is that film.
Yeah, I agree. Of the immigrants struggling and coming to America and in a very real sense displacing white America, the WASP America, and making a way for them, making a path for themselves in America. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on Gran Torino?
Well, I think the Gran Torino. I think Walt Kowalski is one of the last great American heroes, frankly.
Yeah,
and even in his most heroic acts, even above and beyond the ending of the film, which is, I don't want to spoil it, but you can gather what it might be.
No, let's assume that people who are listening to this episode, we've gone into such detail. Let's assume that the people listening to this episode have all seen the picture, so spoil it away.
So the self-sacrifice of Walt Kowalski to save his neighbors against these fucking hoodlums who are
right, which is basically the shootist. It's the ending of the shootist.
It's the exact same ending as the shootist. But even that's not the most heroic thing he does. It's very heroic. It's the climax of the movie, but it's not the most heroic. Because the most heroic is taking this little runt of a boy and say, "I'm going to basically tell you how to be a man." God damn it, in the traditional American way. And it's like, I'm not going to be gentle to you. I'm just going to treat you the way I would treat anybody who deserves to be treated, and I'll make fun of your fucking ass if I have, and I'll be a racist in front of you because I don't give a shit, and all of that stuff. That's it. He is I think Walt is probably the best hero to come out of the last 20 years.
Yeah. The Walt Kowalski character, what's interesting about him is that he's a racist in his words, but not in his actions. And that's the thing about him that I think that leftist critics can't really stomach the picture, yet at the same time they can't shit on it because it's just his mouth running off. All them gooks and slopes and slants and spicks and niggers and kikes and yids and I'm running out of racial epithets, right? But his actions, he takes this little pathetic little Hmong boy and turns him into a man. That's what he does. Or doesn't turn him into a man completely, but sends him in the right path of where he has to be, okay? It's a truly selfless act, and it is truly, what you call it, it doesn't have a shred of racism because he looks at the boy as what he could be. He looks at the best version of the kid, okay? And sees the best version of the kid and tries to put him in that direction, on that path, which is the height of anti-racism, if you will, right?
Well, he recognizes, hey, look, there's a fundamental failure in his life, his being Walt's, which is, my couldn't preserve my community. My kids are assholes. Well, my wife's gone. There's a fundamental failure. I'm going to protect, or at least I'm going to salvage something.
Yeah, and it's this kid. Yeah, and what's interesting too is that his family, they are the epitome of the top 20%. They are these selfish, materialistic fuckheads who are only interested in their own convenience. The granddaughter, you can tell she's a whore. She is a materialistic pig, who cares about the Torino as an object. She doesn't give a shit about it as an expression of her grandfather's existence and his life, right? Yeah, exactly. He put the transmission in the fucking car while he was on the assembly line in 73 or whatever the fuck, right? That is and the Hmong kid cares about that, okay? I think that he could have found a better actor to play the role. Okay, I think that the kid was just not up to the task. Okay, he's not a very compelling presence. Okay, I think he should have had like a more compelling actor play the role. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, I don't want to shit on the kid, but I don't think he was up to the role.
I always say he's serviceable. That's generally how I get out of
the girl was great.
Blow me away.
The
girl was great.
She was great, and that terrific scene, which was actually the white boy is his own kid, Scott Eastwood, and that's terrific scene where he shows up. And the black gangbangers, and he says to the white kid, "Shut up, pussy," I mean, I think the same as these niggers, right? It's so goddamn funny.
You want to be the biggest petty in the fucking nigger clan? They don't think of you as your bro, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, he's on the side of the black kids.
Walt has the best. Walt exhibits. I've cited Slavoj Žižek before, but he actually says many intelligent things. Walt exhibits the fundamental truth that Žižek would always say about what was happening in the Balkans before Balkanization happened, which was to say, your racial epitaphs were the way by which you set aside the tensions and you just calm things down. The fact that Walt is so willing to say, hey, you fucking, Dago, you're raising your price on me. What are you, part Jew now all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And all of that stuff, it deflates the tension. It's like, I'm making fun of all of the general tensions that we're told we should have with each other, and we'll fucking make through it.
Yeah.
You disarm the fundamental tools that would be used, against each other based on the racial identity. By virtue of just making fun of the very thing.
Yeah.
And Walt exhibits that, and that's why leftist critics don't know what to fucking do with it.
Yeah, because look, his actions are so anti-racist and so decent, and when he goes to the Hmong house, right? And and that's when he notices the kid. I mean, really sees him and really sees how fucking lost he is. Because the kid doesn't have any kind of father figure, and you can tell he is yearning to be a father figure. He is yearning to be that guy. So there's the obligatory, wax on, wax off scenes, of getting the kid to do stuff to like sort of like train him like Karate Kid shit, which is it's the genre picture in a certain regard. But what I find really interesting is that the central metaphor of the car Okay, I mean, you know that I'm crazy about car metaphors, right?
Yeah.
The Gran Torino. See, Gran Torino is retrospectively it's becoming a classic. We actually had one in when I was growing up in the '70s. We had a Gran Torino Sport. It was like copper colored, metallic copper paint job, and a white vinyl top, and it was a fucking cool car. It was a two-door.
Yeah.
Big fucking monster. I mean, it was when Detroit made him big, and made him loud, and just it is a friend of mine used to call them ghetto cruisers, because they are just these monster cars that you drive around and you feel like you're in a goddamn tank, right? And inside it's like a living room, right? It's not bucket seats, it's like bench seating, right? Well, actually, no. The around that time they started doing bucket seats. I forget. But I remember the back seat was just this bench seating, right? And that was the thing, big cars like that had the bench seating, and you felt like you were in a living room. You could like spread out, you can, man spread. You drape your arm over the back of the seat, and you felt like a fucking god driving a car like that. I mean, I've driven ghetto cruisers, right? And the car that I've been thinking about very carefully about getting, but it's actually very difficult to get in Eastern Europe, is an LTD. I want to get a big old like 73 LTD, because those are, which is sort of like the class of the Gran Torino. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, see, it's big, comfortable, self-confident vehicle. Okay.
Yes.
It's interesting that was the choice of the car, because it's a very masculine car. Okay, it's like I said, big, self-confident, knows what it's about. All the other cars are just these crappy little jobs, except the pickup truck that Walt drives, because he's got a daily driver, which is the pickup truck, and he's got the Gran Torino that he cleans it with a baby diaper, right? But
the film fundamentally understands the great image of the American male in particular, but the American in general, in the car, and the freedom and the confidence expressed within. I mean, that's understood. That image of America has been understood for a while. It's so important that that's the image of a story happening in Detroit, a city in decline, a city in which the Americanness of itself is being either crumbling or eradicated or fundamentally replaced, as the immigrant story kind of tells you.
Yeah.
And so, what does Walt bequeath to the kid he saves, the kid he turns into
the car,
an American male? It's the car.
Yeah, the car, the chariot.
As long
of the
as
American male.
you don't put any stripes on it, you don't put a fucking fin or whatever you zipper heads are goddamn. In other words, it's a joke, but when he's saying something important there, he's like, don't take away the Americanness of this car.
Yeah, don't pimp it up. Yeah. What I like about the way the family is portrayed. They're so materialistic. They have so many material possessions, and yet they want more.
Right.
That was the thing. They want to, and they want convenience, their own convenience above all. I think that was something that was really powerful, and also contrast his own family of how atomized they are to the Hmong.
Oh yeah.
The Hmong, they're all hanging out together. They're all eating together. They're all in each other's pockets all the time. He goes to that party.
Like the old Pollock families.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's clearly. I mean, it's nowhere stated, not even close. But you can imagine him having grown up in an environment like that, and you can imagine him dreaming about that. Yeah, dreaming about that time when everybody was in each other's pockets. Everybody knew everybody else's business. They were all together, and you'd see over there the teenagers like starting to flirt, and they're all like hanging out in a group under the supervision of the parents, and the old people are there, and the babies are running around, and all together in a way that doesn't happen anymore. Everybody's atomized.
It's one of those odd details because the guy is a Polak. I just know everything about this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when he goes to the Hmong family, exactly, he recognizes exactly how the old Polak families would have acted. He's not Walt. He's Władek. Mm-hmm. In my mind, I know exactly what this guy grew up in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know exactly why he took to the family.
The fucking zipper heads were just like him. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the power of the scene. And yeah, when the gang is there's almost a sense. Okay, this, and maybe this is just not projection, but just like imagining on my part. But then again, great art is supposed to make you imagine stuff. There's almost a sense I get that maybe he was that boy who had been attracted to the cool gangs, and that somebody had sent him on the straight and narrow. Maybe I'm just like seeing things that aren't there.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, I think you could be true. Like, for example, Walt is a Korean War vet, and he recognizes shit that went down there. I can envision when he says that
we stacked the dead gooks bodies 10 feet high.
We used to stack gooks like you 10 feet high, use them for sandbags and everything. And what I could easily believe, this is a young son of a bitch kid. It's like, I'm gonna be a fucking soldier. I'll kill some people. It makes no difference to me, kind of thing. And it's like, oh, you grow up pretty fast in a war. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially that kind of war.
Yeah, that kind of really brutal kind of, because that was the last great sweeping armies clashing it out kind of war. Okay, because there hasn't been a war like that, and the Chinese were up to the task of fighting the Americans. Yeah, but okay, it was. How could I put this? We should do an episode on the Korean War, by the way. I don't know enough about that history. I'm going to look into it, and maybe we should do an episode about it, because it would be apropos to this North and South Korea situation, and the fact that they seem to be reunifying after all these decades. But anyway, I think, the more I think about it, I think you're right, that Walt Kowalski is like one of the last great American characters. And the movie is so on point in a way that was not obvious at the time about immigration and the browning of America. And it's really interesting because at the time it was not viewed so politically, okay? I mean, I don't recall, do you?
No, well, it really wasn't, or at least the tone of the discussion wasn't that. The tone of the discussion, and it's related, I think, to the politics, even though nobody recognized it at the time, which was they recognized that this is Clint's last great role. He's probably going to retire at this. He can't be a great action hero, and the sacrificial element of it was supposed to represent a capstone of the book closing on Eastwood's career. That type of character.
Yeah, because has he done another role? Has he done another acting role?
I don't think that's a good question. I don't think he has. Let me look at the he did like a little thing like in like was it The Trouble with Curve or something like that?
Oh yeah, that was a crappy picture. Yeah.
And I think he's gonna be in a movie now called The Mule or something. I don't know.
Never heard of
that.
He
is. Yeah. I guess it's upcoming film he's directing. American crime film directed by Clint Eastwood.
A 90-year-old horticulturalist and World War II veteran is caught transporting $3 million worth of cocaine through Michigan for a Mexican drug cartel. That sounds fun.
Hopefully he makes it. I mean, well, he's got longevity in his family. His mother lasted like 150 years.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing that's interesting, the association he's had with Bradley Cooper, because I'm seeing here that he's acting in that picture too. It's really interesting because I think that Bradley Cooper is going to have. He's going to be around for decades. I think he's the real deal, and I think that he's. How can I put it? There's something about Brad Cooper that it's sort of like Clint Eastwood. I mean, he's a very shrewd actor, and he is moving into directing. He's doing A Star Is Born. The fourth remake of that picture, I think it is, or the fourth iteration of that picture at this point.
Eventually, there are certain movies you just say, okay, every generation they're going to make it again, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, the story in itself I've never found that compelling, but it's kind of interesting to see the various iterations. And the last one was with Barbara Streisand and what's his face, Chris Christopherson. And I'm kind of interested. Was there one between them? I can't recall.
I can't either. Now I'm going to look it up because I want to.
Yeah, but anyway, the three pictures that I would argue that are like sort of like the capstone of his career were Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby, and Gran Torino. Like if you view them as the same character, okay, it's really interesting. And he dies at the end of Gran Torino, but $1 Million Baby. I found that picture really really interesting because of the contemporary pictures that he's been doing. He has been showing the American family in an incredibly negative light. You know, he shows them as fat, neckbeard, entitled people who don't give a shit about anything but their own. He's presenting the American family in a deeply pessimistic way, the white ethno family. Because look at what's her name, Hilary Swank's character in that her family. They are these fat, horrible trailer trash, horrible people. I mean, it's not that they're poor. That's not why they're horrible. It's that they are fundamentally horrible people who happen to be poor, but who are of course poor because they're fucking lazy, which is a product of them being awful people. There is that sense that Clint Eastwood has that poverty many times comes from just lack of effort, lack of willingness to get the job done, you know?
Yeah,
and that's
there's a scene in $1 Million Baby that summarizes it perfectly, which is Hilary Swank, who wants to be a boxer, eventually has a certain degree of success she's building up, has enough money to be able to give her mother a house,
right?
You
modest
get
house,
a home of your own kind of thing. Every kid, who cares about their family would love to be able to do that. What is the mother's response? You can't do this because they'll find out and take away my welfare checks.
No.
And Clint has to, her mentor has to watch this kid basically realize that in a fundamental way, that act reveals that she's become effectively an orphan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The family's self-interest has forced them to abandon the daughter who's trying to help them.
No, but it's not only that. It's I viewed it differently. I viewed it as sort of like her efforts to become something of herself, and in this almost quixotic pursuit to be a successful fighter, and actually become successful. Because she shouldn't be successful. She's too old. She has no training. I mean, a lot of these fighters start when they're very, very young, and and she becomes successful. And the fact that that this happens, it seems more to me a realization on the character's part, and this I view it as an effort in the direction that they are that she sees who they actually are for the first time.
Yeah, that's why I said she realizes she's an orphan.
Yeah, no, but no, and not the implication would be that she's an orphan, but in the sense of them on a moral level, realizing that they are not valuable people, that they don't understand what she sacrificed to get to the position she is. There's that heartbreaking scene, at least for me, when she's stealing the leftover food at the restaurant she works at.
Mm-hmm.
I found that just so sad. Contrast that to the fatness and sloth of her family. And she's this skinny thing trying to, get some protein as opposed to just lard, And she has that great line about what was the line that she says, she uses the word lard in some line of hers where she's talking to Clint Eastwood and explaining how she wants to get away from her family. It was just really...
I can't remember. It's been a lot. That's of the three movies we're discussing, it's the one I remember the least, even though I do remember it.
Because it's the weakest. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the least morally compelling. Because it's just a tragedy, and the fact it's a more sentimental picture. Because there's no question as to the moral righteousness of his actions. Okay. When he kills her, because he does kill her in the end. I mean, euthanize her. Let's because killing sounds severe. It's not.
Well, yeah, we forgot something that got her in a position to which the question of killing her is considered moral. She gets sucker punched in the middle of a fight and breaks her neck on a stool and becomes quadriplegic.
Yeah. And that was, sentimental, kind of ridiculous, but it underscored what was important. And how could I put it? I think it was a cheap shot. I thought that the Eastern German character was underdeveloped. It would have been more interesting if we'd seen more of her and seen her as the mirror image of the Hilary Swank character, and who arrived at the same spot, but in different ways with a different outlook, not so hopeful, not so optimistic. because she was supposed to have been a prostitute, and you could easily see the Swank's character. I never understood and never bought the fact that she wouldn't have prostituted herself at some point. Okay, that's sort of like an example of a script that was undercooked. That it could have been just developed a little bit further, and it would have been very interesting, because there was a lot of elements that allowed for that. Okay, but anyway, going back to the thing, she becomes a quadriplegic, and so that's sort of like not cheap. It seems a little
gerrymandered,
jury rigged, yeah. But the thing is, it allows for how could I put it? You see, like a fighter, right? They age, and over the decades, they fall into the position that Hilary Swank is. Almost immediately, which is that great line. I don't want to forget all those cheering people. I don't want to, have it disappear. I mean, God, the ending moved me very much. The ending of the picture, because there are several scenes between them where Hilary Swank is talking to Clint Eastwood, and really thinking about it now, it still moves me. Of her. Now that she's paralyzed, she doesn't want to be robbed of all the things that she has, of all the things that happened, and that's why she wants to die, and how she is, she tries to bite off her own tongue so that she'll die by suffocation, and so they just load her up with medication, and what's the point of living like that? And that's the point, and that's the interesting thing about the movie, that, see, she doesn't want to live in stasis. And Clint Eastwood's character has been living in stasis. He's been stuck in that stupid boxing thing, and he's paralyzed. Because what's interesting is that his character is afraid in a way that the Hilary Swank character is not afraid. You see what I'm saying? And that's the thing that she shows him up, that he's been afraid all these years. He's afraid that his fighters will get hurt. He's afraid of contacting his daughter. He's afraid of doing something else instead of having the shitty little gym that he's got, right? He's afraid. And so he's become static and bitter. Whereas she was deliberately trying to change her life. Incompetently, not successfully at first, not until she found him to train her, right? But she is striving towards something. Whereas he is static, and she breaks him out of it. Euthanizing her breaks him out of his stasis into something new. You never really know.
Well, I think
you're stretching it.
Yeah. Well, I would say she broke him out of his stasis by having him train her and allow her to be successful. The thing that pushes it beyond the limit, and the thing that challenges him really in a horrific way, is his participation in her suicide. Because remember, what is he afraid of? He's afraid of the fact that his actions of enabling others will bring them to ruin.
Right.
Because that one of his earlier fighters got in a bad way because of him training him and being loose with things. Well, anyway, he trains her, and he didn't keep an eye out on things, and and he's probably blaming himself for the situation she's in. But she wants him to help her finish her life. Now, this is a guy, as throughout the movie, who's trying to ignore the relationship with God that's present and around him. Mm-hmm. Eventually, because of this situation, he goes to the priest who's been hovering around him, or he's been fucking with the priest he's been fucking with for like 23 years. Yeah, and the priest says, "Look, if you go through with this, you're never going to escape it. Mm-hmm. You will never find yourself again." Mm-hmm. And it's true. It costs him dearly. He does it for her because she has that, and this, I don't mean this in a sort of negative way. She has that spell on him. She is the person who could convince him to do things.
Right.
But that's why I think the film is interestingly ambiguous, is like, what is his punishment for enabling this? And it doesn't really take sides on that. And I'll give Clint Eastwood this credit, and it's in Gran Torino as well. The religious element of these films is very real. It's not like a sort of new age, atheist. Like, I love the smell of the incense, and isn't it such a pretty building? No, it's
Pass
the
the soy,
fundamental
please. Yeah.
origin. Exactly. No, it's the fundamental ethical issues of the
Yeah.
religion which he embraces. And it's not a shock to me that there was a priest an important priest in Million Dollar Baby. There's an important priest in Gran Torino, and
There
there's
is a
no
priest.
priest per
I
se.
forget. I forget.
Yeah, remember the young kid who he in Gran Torino, Walt says, like, you just going around tricking old women into giving you money and this, that, and other shit. He's playing on old women's superstitions,
Mhm.
but eventually he does make
Yeah, yeah, I
amends
remember.
with
Yeah, he wasn't a particularly memorable actor, but perhaps that was a little bit of the point. But okay, yeah, you're right. There was but there isn't one in Unforgiven. Not that no, there's not.
but the film The Unforgiven just it's from an era which wasn't where it didn't need to happen. You didn't need to have a priest to tell you about it because it was
Yeah,
so subsumed into the DNA of the
yeah,
life at the time that everybody just knew it.
yeah,
Everybody knew their Bible.
yeah. No, that's very true. But okay, there was the priest thing. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about Million Dollar Baby as we're talking here, and I'm finding it more profound. I was so terribly moved by the final sequence when he tells her what that Irish expression was that everybody called her that.
Mo Crucel or Mo Crucel.
Yeah,
I forget exactly how to pronounce it.
Yeah, and I was just so terribly moved by that. I still am moved because it was just the perfect moment to bring that reveal. Okay. And it really caught me by surprise. And if that was the intention, which I suspect it was very well done because it was impressed on you very powerfully, and then sort of like dropped, and then just brought back very, very effectively at the right moment when it really mattered, And yeah, I like that picture very much. I like very much Morgan Freeman's performance. And there's a naturalness between them. I think that those are the two iconic actors who work brilliantly together. And there's a sense that both of them are, sort of like, carved out of a granite mountaintop, kind of like Mount Rushmore kind of situation. You know what I mean? And I think that they're both terrific actors, and their scenes, their quotidian scenes, that there are several of them, just work beautifully. They're just a casual ease. But you know what I thought would have been interesting, and okay, this is changing the movie around a bit, and this is just a lark, but it would have been interesting if the Morgan Freeman character had only been visible to Clint Eastwood, and that no other character saw him, and he was essentially the possibility that he's a ghost. Or he's just his imagination. The fighter,
the ghost of the fighter that Clint did not protect.
Yeah. That would have been really interesting. In a sense, he functions in that role, okay? But it would have been better if it had been more explicit because he actually does interact with the other characters. And there's that young character that was played by that comedian and I didn't understand his role in the picture.
Oh, you mean the retarded
Jay
kid
Baruchel. Yeah. The retarded kid who's trying to be a boxer. I didn't understand his role. What was the point of him?
Well, I mean, I think he's a fundamental proxy for the spirit of Hilary Swank's character, which is to say, it's very obvious this guy should not be doing anything, but his passion to do so demands that he be accepted as, doing this thing that compels him.
But we have the Hilary Swank character, so why do we need him as a proxy for her?
It needs to be explicit because with her you can get around it. It's not very clear, or it's not as obvious.
Well, just one defeat would have been enough, one early defeat, so that you realize this is a real thing and you can get really hurt. I didn't understand that character. I'm trying to understand it because Eastwood is a strong enough director, an intelligent enough director, that you'd figure that something that he's trying to say would be relatively clear, but I did not understand what that character was saying at all. I mean, I understand the point you're making, but it doesn't seem... It seems like, why have the character at all? Why not just get rid of him? You see what I'm saying?
I mean, my attitude toward it is like, does the fact that he's there make it a lesser film?
Well, no,
That seems like an absurd.
you don't care enough about the picture because for you it's Gran Torino is the big Kahuna of the latest Clint Eastwood pictures, and I agree. I think that Gran Torino is a more important picture.
Well, I mean, my attitude is like the fact that he's there doesn't take something away from the film. You know what
Oh
I mean?
no! But it just confused me, and it just didn't seem like because I like my art to be like contained and not to have any loose threads. I like it all to be just like nice and tidy. Okay, and I was like, such a big character, and where's he going? I don't get it. But anyway. My fascination with that picture is on a sentimental level because I think it is a incredibly good tearjerker. Okay, and I don't think enough tearjerkers are made. I love my tearjerkers. Okay, I don't like horror movies, but I love tearjerkers, and that was a really good tearjerker. And here's another tearjerker of his career, which was The Bridges of Madison County. It was fucking good. It was really fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like thinking to myself, the guy can do pretty much all. And he had, by the way, the most. This is the thing that's incredible. A couple of years ago, he did American Sniper. Well, you can argue about that picture all you want, and the fake baby and all that shit, right? But it was the most successful picture of the year. Did you know that?
Yep, I did.
Yeah. That is something that the son of a bitch, 60 years into his fucking career, can land the #1 hit movie of the year. And it is clearly a success because of the direction. I mean, did you see that picture? What did you think of it?
Funny thing is, I did not see that picture of all. I know it's a shock to say I didn't, but
I'm surprised.
It's not because I'm like, oh, I can't bring myself to watch it, or there's something I fundamentally don't like about it. It's just the mood never struck to watch it. Sometimes that happens. Where you're just like, now's not the time to watch it. I want to watch it, but I'm not feeling it. Maybe after tonight I'll watch it actually because I've been meaning to see it. You know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting picture because in a very real sense, you feel as if Clint Eastwood is handing the baton of the iconic character to Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper is a different kind of actor. He's a much more sophisticated actor with a greater range than Clint Eastwood. So there was a clear sense that he's sort of like passing the baton. The picture is a fantasy because the real Kyle, what's his name? Chris Kyle?
Chris Kyle, yeah.
Yeah, he was a fabulist, and he seems overall to be an evil man. I do not think highly of the guy. From what I understand of him, like the actual facts, he made stuff up. He was a person who reveled in murder, unlike what the movie shows. Okay, you can read it in his autobiography. I've read big chunks of it, and he's an unpleasant man. Reading it, you feel that the guy is not just like rah rah America, fuck yeah, but more like rah rah America, fuck yeah, and it allows me to carry out the absolute worst impulses that human beings have. It would have been interesting if that picture had been more realistic. It certainly would not have been a successful picture because it would have been a very ugly picture, painting a portrait of a very ugly man, which I think that I don't like the guy at all, as you can tell.
And I remember, and that's the thing I do remember about the attitude around the film. Remember we had said like at the time we didn't, Gran Torino didn't have the politics, discussed as the main critical response to the movie. It was different for American Sniper. I remember it clearly being like, this is glorifying American violence, blah, 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 and all of that kind of thing. And it was the early innings because 2014, let's face it, was the high point of the arch SJW-ish left-wing vomit that we were living through at the time.
No, it's getting worse now. I mean, I don't know why you're saying 2014. I mean, look at the life now.
No, what you're seeing now is death throes and violence, and like at least there's an opposition and people are like ready to punch over it. No, that was like it was uncontested, rule of the land. And 2014. That's why I think it was the worst.
Okay, well, we're quibbling. The issue, insofar as American Sniper is concerned, it's a heroic picture, but it used as its raw material a man whom I just see, how could I put it? The guy was a sniper, and he loved being a sniper. Okay, and that right there is the problem. Okay, in Jarhead, which is also about a sniper, it's a lesser. It's actually a better picture than American Sniper, and it's much more interesting because it explains the catharsis of wanting to kill somebody. Okay, whereas in American Sniper, or in the actual American Sniper, the real guy, he reveled in it. In the movie is like sort of like an action movie where there's a opposition sniper and they're sort of like, chasing each other through the Iraq War, right? And this guy is like a hero. He's in the movie, he's painted as a hero, but my reading of his autobiography is the guy was a bully who reveled in murder. Okay, he didn't give a shit about the fact that he was killing people. It's not that he thought that that they had it coming, but rather he was indifferent. He did not see humanity in the people he killed. Now, I'm not saying that all murder is wrong. I'm not saying that killing people in warfare is something that you should shy away from. No, that's the whole point.
I think what you're trying to say is, and I think this is why it's different from what you're worried people are going to say you're saying. I think what you're really saying is there's a certain type of people who will use the conditions of war as an excuse to, as it were, give legal blessing to their base desires, which is, I'm going to go kill some motherfuckers today.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. In Jarhead, the brilliance of the picture, and because there are a lot of aspects of Jarhead that just don't work or stupid or this or that or the other, but the absolute brilliance of it is that the sniper team made up of Peter Sarsgaard and Jake Gyllenhaal, which fit together perfectly, is that they wanted to see the pink mist because they'd been primed by their whole training, by everything that they'd done, to be in a position to shoot somebody in the head and see the pink mist. But it was like a cathartic moment for them because that was the whole point of their lives, right? In the military. So it's different. They weren't seeing it on a moral level. It's not that they wanted to murder people, okay? It's that they had been building to this crescendo, this emotional crescendo, and they were denied the pink mist at the last second, right? And it was the one time that they were going to shoot somebody in the whole fucking war, right? It's different, You see what I'm saying?
Well, what's interesting about these movies, which I'm surprised. I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so you'll have to tell me if.
Oh, you haven't seen Jarhead?
No, I haven't seen Jarhead either. Oh. And I'm thinking more of American Sniper, but it's applicable to Jarhead, which is for the longest time. I mean, for centuries, as long as there've been guns, the most hated soldier on the battlefield is the sniper.
Yeah.
Because the sniper shoots from afar, you can't see him. He's a coward. He takes you guys one by one. If in war, if they ever capture the sniper doesn't survive.
Yeah.
Because think of like Full Metal Jacket. Right. The ending of Full Metal Jacket, the sniper shooting them all one by one. Her head was going to get fucking cut off. That's how that situation was going to end. And so to me, that dynamic, whether you liked the guy or not, does it exist? Is it part of the story in any way? Because I feel like that's ripe narrative structure, almost a fundamental DNA to that type of character that I can't. If I were the filmmaker, I could not bring myself to not mention it. You know what I mean? To not encounter it in the story. It's in the fundamental DNA of the war with the guns that type of soldier is the worst creature on the battlefield, whether they're doing their job well or not. I know we've made heroicness out of them because we play games and the sniper is always very cool. There's a couple of movies like Enemy at the Gates where they try to make a big deal about the snipers, but fundamentally the sniper is the most hated soldier on the battlefield. Yeah. Just like at sea, the most hated ship is the submarine.
Yeah, because it's sly. You don't see them coming. And there's the natural sense that true heroism comes from facing your enemies face to face, man to man, and that's why every underhanded plot, every poisoning, every action where a fundamental assumption is violated. When you drink your wine or your coffee or whatever, you assume that it's wine or coffee or whatever. You don't assume that there's poison in it. There are basic assumptions that you have. You're cruising in your ship and you're looking for the enemy ships. you're assuming that the sea is calm, that there are only fish in the sea, not a submarine
Right.
that will kill you. You're walking along in the jungle, and all of a sudden you get shot by some faraway sniper. It breaks the rules. That's the thing about a sniper. He's breaking the rules. The
Yeah.
picture. We're going down a rabbit hole here in this part of the conversation, but the picture of American Sniper, you should see it, but it's a crowd pleaser. It's a crowd pleaser, and it makes out of this guy, Chris Kyle, a hero, right?
Mm.
But I think that it was a successful picture. It was a commercially very successful picture. It was like $350 million. Really did wonders for both of well, it didn't do wonders for either of their careers because they were on the upslope. I don't think either one of them will feel that it was a capstone of their career on an artistic level.
Yeah.
And not even on a commercial level, because I see both of them, assuming Clint Eastwood lives long enough, that they'll both have bigger successes. It's sort of like noteworthy because it was the most successful picture of that year and of their respective careers so far. But it's certainly not a great picture. The great picture, is Gran Torino.
And part of the reason I bring up Gran Torino, Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby is important because they speak to something even bigger, which I think is a good capstone for this episode. Is those are films of Clint Eastwood. It's going to sound morbid, preparing for the death of his type of individual.
Yeah,
absolutely. Unforgiven retires the Western. $1 Million Baby, and it doesn't really retire anything, but it's fundamentally concerned with preparing yourself for the end. And in some sense, Gran Torino is preparing the end of the great white American hero. It's hard. It's hard to say that and to admit to that, and nobody in our audience, I think, would really want to say that. But I think that's what the film is preparing itself for, at least his generation of that hero. And so that's the thing because I thought to myself, like, because celebrities die all the time. It's the nature of life, right? And I think to myself, who are the next actors who, if they go, it's going to mean something to me. I've often thought, it's going to be Clint. I thought Jack, and I think Jack would, to a certain extent, yes, but not like Clint. Clint is going to be the last. Clint's the last Marvel man outside of, ironically enough, Kirk Douglas. Clint and Kirk Douglas are the last iconic, great.
But my vision of Kirk Douglas is colored by his personal life, specifically the fact that he raped Natalie Wood and was generally a horrible, horrible man. Clint Eastwood had a complicated personal life, as we all do. Okay, and famously he crashed Sandra Locke's car when he went to see. He was meeting her at some lawyer's, and he saw her car, and out of just frustration with their palimony suit, he crashed his car into hers. It was empty, and totaled both of them. But see, that is just like, I don't have a problem with that.
That's human frustration. That's human frustration. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, and he's fucked around and this and that. That's perfectly fine. But like Kirk Douglas he's a rapist, and it's a well-known fact that he raped Natalie Wood when she was young, and he was that kind of a guy. And so I can't. My vision of his is colored, and I'm not white knighting or any shit like that, but it's just there are some things that color how you see somebody in such a way that you can never see them any other way. You see what I'm saying? Some things, I think, some sins color your appreciation of them in a way that can never be changed. You see what I'm saying? And so far as actors are concerned,
I didn't actually know that story about Kurt and Natalie.
Yeah. So no, it's a very well known story, and but anyway, look, I'm hopscotching around. The point I'm trying to make here, insofar as Clint Eastwood's death is concerned, let's hope he has many more years ahead of him. But he's 90 at this point. How old is he, by the way?
Well, in his late 80s.
Yeah,
I think like.
Yeah.
Let me look that up.
It's really funny. He did that silly thing at the Republican National Convention of talking to a chair.
88. Yeah.
And the thing is, everybody at the time sort of mocked him, right? But it really wasn't so much as a dent in his reputation.
Well, it was funny. I remember distinctly at the time, and everybody thought he was crazy.
Cringy.
Was that? No. Bill Maher was saying that killed. You guys don't understand. He fucking won over the audience with that. And people are saying, no, he's just a kooky old man. He says, Bill Maher was like, I hate his politics, but no, the guy fucking won the crowd.
I didn't notice. I mean, how did he win the crowd? I mean, at the time it seemed cringy.
He says he said that bit killed. That audience was totally in for him doing that bit of like addressing the empty chair with Obama in it. Yes, I agree. For me, it was cringy because it's an old man doing it. But no, that audience loved it.
Yeah, because a lot of times what you see on TV and what is happening live are two very different things. It's interesting that he never did a play.
I think along those same line that John Ford says, I make Westerns, Clint's like, I'm not an actor on that.
I make movies.
It's my it's like the line from my favorite year? It's like, I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, he is a movie star because he has great minimalist acting. Another great minimalist actor was Robert Redford in his prime. Not after he got that horrible plastic surgery, but back in All the President's Men. When he's doing those phone calls and the tight close up on his face, brilliant Gordon Willis photography, right? And did it well. Those shots are an homage to the Italian westerns, the spaghetti westerns, where Sergio Leone has those tight close-ups on Clint, right? And just that expression, and you're like, God damn, because it's so easy to go over the top. It's so easy, and he never did. I cannot recall a single moment when he went over the top.
Honestly, the only time you could ever probably say he like stretched his face a little bit is probably in Play Misty for me, and even then, like barely.
No. I'll tell you the one movie, and I want to end the podcast on this movie, Bronco Billy. Oh. Bronco Billy is I love Bronco Billy. I think that is just one of the one of the most absurdly optimistic movies ever made. I just find it it's not a great movie. It's a typical 70s picture. It looks 70s. The directing is 70s. Everything, the acting, the art direction, what have you. Yeah, a lot of the shots feel like TV almost, compositionally at least. But it's such a optimistic and happy picture. So American. A shoe salesman who decided to be a rodeo star. It's just so lovely. You know what I mean?
Well, Clint Eastwood said explicitly that when he made that film, he wanted it to be a Frank Capra movie.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are big on movie history, Frank Capra was like all those like feel good, like the quintessential Frank Capra movie is It's a Wonderful Life,
right? But
also Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The fundamental like goodness of America on display kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. But okay, so on that note, is he a great director? Yes, indisputably. And we can point to Unforgiven as great direction. And Gran Torino is fucking great direction. And fucking invisible direction. I mean, you cannot see the director in that picture, and yet he's all over it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So on that note, we want to call it a podcast?
Call it a podcast. Yes. Go out and gather up the Clint Eastwood movies. My friends, you pick these up on the cheap. Don't worry about, saying, oh, how much, sit down and watch them. It's worth it. Yeah.
And they're all good. Even the minor works are interesting. And definitely Gran Torino, Unforgiven, fucking must see. Unforgiven, Gran Torino.
And like even the films he didn't direct, but were strong. He directed some of them.
And Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Yeah.
The spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
Go see it. A little movie of his, we didn't talk about. I'll just throw it out there because they fucking remade it poorly. The Beguiled.
Which one was that?
The Beguiled it's a Don Siegel movie. It's where Clint Eastwood is a Union soldier who deserts from the army and is like wounded and delirious. And he gets picked up in a woman's boarding house or a boarding school or old mansion in the South. And all the girls love the fact that there's a man in there. And even the head mistress wants him. And then there's machinations between the women over him. And it gets into gothic territory very quickly.
Oh, I'm gonna have to see that one. I've never seen it because I know that the Colin Farrell version. Colin Farrell is fucking the death of any good movie. And box office poison. I mean, he's a good actor. That's the worst part. But whenever he's in a movie, the movie sort of like fails. He's like a bad luck token. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he is the worst part of Alexander in a movie I really wanted to enjoy.
The worst part is Alexander is such a fucking compelling story. I mean, what Alexander did, if you read the history of Alexander the Great, it was brilliant. And it was so easy to turn it into a compelling movie. And Oliver Stone, who is a objectively great filmmaker, and we got to talk about him sometime, he fucked it up righteously. How the fuck do you fuck up Alexander, for crying out loud?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a two-step. You cast Colin Farrell as Alexander, and then you cast
Angelina
Val
Jolie
Kilmer
as the mother.
and Angelina Jolie, and make them Scottish, because in the movie it's like, well, all the Greeks have English accents, so what should we do with the Macedonians? Fucking give them Scottish accents if they're not even Scottish. Like, oh my God, you really went there.
No, and totally absurd, and it was just a bad script, just a horrible script.
I mean, that's one of those movies where it's awful, but I tell myself I want to like it. You know, I keep watching it every so often to try and find something like it.
No, there have been like a bunch of